Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of hot dryers, hairspray clouds, and the low, comfortable hum of gossip drifting between salon chairs. We're talking about a full day inside a 1970s American beauty salon, the kind of place where women arrived with rollers still in their hair from the night before and left 3 hours later feeling like a completely different person. Before we get into it, thank you so much for suggesting this one. You always seem to know exactly the kind of quiet, ordinary magic this channel loves to sit inside, and this topic is no exception. If you are enjoying these evenings together, a like and a subscribe genuinely helps this little channel keep going, and if you have a moment, drop a comment letting me know where you're tucked in tonight. We're also now on Spotify, so if you would rather drift off to sleep with just the sound of my voice, you can find us there too. The link is down in the description. Now go ahead and get comfortable. Dim the lights if you can. Maybe switch on a fan for that soft, steady hush in the background. Pull your blanket up, settle into your pillow, and let your shoulders drop. What did it actually feel like to sit under one of those big hooded dryers for 45 minutes with nothing to do but flip through a magazine? What did a salon actually smell like all at once? The perm solution, the hairspray, the coffee percolating in the back room. What did women talk about while they waited their turn? And how much of the day's real news travelled through that room before it ever reached anywhere else? What did it feel like to trust a stranger with scissors so completely? Appointment after appointment, year after year. And just like that, it is 1972. The salon door is propped open to let in the morning air. Someone is already at the front desk with a pot of coffee going. The chairs are still empty, but not for long. The bell above the door has not rung yet, and the salon sits in that rare, unbothered quiet that only exists for about 20 minutes a day. The chairs are empty, angled just slightly toward the mirrors, waiting. The smell of yesterday's hairspray still clings faintly to the curtains, mixing now with a fresh, sharp scent of ammonia as someone mixes the first batch of perm solution of the day. It is the kind of quiet that is harder to find now, a business about to open its doors, still holding its breath. The owner moves through the space with the ease of someone who has done this every morning for years. She flips on the overhead lights one bank at a time, and the room slowly wakes up around her, the mirrors catching the glow and throwing it back twice as bright. She checks the coffee pot in the back room, adjusts the volume on the small radio sitting on the shelf, and pulls the day's appointment book toward her, running a finger down the list of names penciled in for the hours ahead. Some names she has known for a decade, others are new, referred by a sister or a neighbour, waiting to see if this will become their place too. The stations along the wall are set with the same quiet ritual every morning. Combs sit soaking in tall glass jars of blue disinfectant, their teeth glinting faintly beneath the surface. Scissors are laid out in careful rows, still cool from the drawer. Rollers of every size are sorted into their bins, pink and blue, and the clear ones reserved for the finest hair, each colour meaning something only the stylists themselves fully understand. The capes hang pressed and ready on their hooks, smelling faintly of starch and yesterday's perfume, waiting to be draped over shoulders that have not yet arrived. You can almost feel the room deciding what kind of day it is going to be. Some mornings carry a hush that lasts well past opening, a slow trickle of customers easing in one at a time. Other mornings arrive already restless, the phone ringing before the doors are even unlocked, someone needing a wash and set before a funeral, another needing her colour touched up before a flight. But right now, in this particular sliver of time, none of that has started yet. The salon belongs only to itself. Outside, the street is just beginning to stir. A delivery truck rumbles past, dropping off boxes at the drugstore 2 doors down. A woman walks by with a child's hand in hers, both moving briskly toward the school a few blocks over. None of them look in through the salon window, not yet, though by mid-morning half of them might be sitting in one of these very chairs. There is something almost sacred about a business in these last few private minutes before the world remembers it exists. Inside, the stylist unlocks the supply cabinet and begins pulling out the things the day will need. Fresh towels, folded in crisp, identical squares, stacked high enough to last until closing. Bottles of setting lotion lined up like soldiers on the counter. A fresh box of bobby pins torn open and poured into the little dish that sits at every station, ready to disappear one by one into a dozen different heads of hair before the sun goes down. She hums along faintly to whatever is playing on the radio, not really listening to the words, just letting the melody fill the space the silence would otherwise hold. There is a particular kind of pride in this part of the morning, the part no customer ever sees. It is the pride of a room made ready, of towels folded just so, of combs lined up like they matter, because in a way they do. This salon is not just a place where hair gets cut and curled. It is where women come to be listened to be touched with care, to sit still for an hour in the middle of a week that rarely allows for stillness anywhere else. The owner knows this, even if she would never quite put it into words. She simply keeps the coffee fresh and the chairs clean and trusts that the rest will take care of itself. The bell above the door has not rung yet, but it will any minute now, and when it does, the quiet will lift all at once, replaced by voices and static, and the low electric hum of the first dryer switching on. For now, though, there's only the smell of ammonia and old hairspray, the soft rattle of the coffee pot, and a room standing perfectly still, the way a stage stands still just before the curtain rises. It is a moment that belongs to no one, and everyone who ever worked in a salon like this one remembers it fondly, long after the doors have closed for good. It is 9 o'clock now, and the first regulars are already coming through the door, the ones who do not need to make an appointment because their slot has belonged to them for years. You recognise their perfume before you recognise their faces. There is a rhythm to it. A woman settling into her usual chair the way she might settle into a favourite armchair at home, already talking before she's even taken off her coat. She hangs her coat on the same hook she always uses, a small habit so ingrained that no one questions it anymore, not even the newer girls who have only worked here a few months. Her purse goes on the shelf beneath the mirror, and she settles into the chair with a small sigh, the kind that says she has been waiting all week for exactly this moment. The stylist does not need to ask what she wants today. It is the same as last week, and the week before that, and most weeks going back longer than either of them cares to count. The two of them fall into conversation the way old friends do, picking up mid-sentence from a story that started 3 appointments ago. There is talk of a daughter's new apartment, a husband's complaints about his knee, a recipe that did not turn out quite right on Sunday. None of it is urgent. None of it needs to be. It is simply the comfortable overflow of a week's worth of small thoughts, finally given somewhere to land. Another regular arrives a few minutes later, greeted by name before she has even reached the desk. She's offered coffee without having to ask, poured into the same chipped mug she always uses, the one with a faded rose pattern that nobody has ever bothered to replace. She settles in with the ease of someone entering her own kitchen, commenting on the weather, on the traffic, on a programme she watched the night before that she is certain everyone else must have seen too. It is the kind of intimacy that is harder to find now, this particular blend of familiarity and distance, close enough to know the small details of someone's week, far enough that the friendship never has to carry any real weight outside these walls. You can tell a great deal about a woman by watching how she settles into her chair, whether she leans back and closes her eyes right away, ready to be taken care of, or whether she sits forward, chatting eagerly, more interested in the company than the haircut itself. The stylists know their regulars in the particular, almost intimate way that only comes from years of repeated Tuesdays and Thursdays. They know who takes her coffee black and who needs 2 sugars. They know whose husband recently passed and whose son is overseas, and they know, without being told, which weeks call for gentle conversation and which weeks call for none at all. It is a kind of quiet caretaking that has nothing to do with hair at all, though hair is always the reason given for showing up. By 9:30, 3 or 4 chairs are filled, each with its own small orbit of conversation, overlapping just enough that occasionally someone laughs at a joke meant for the chair beside her. The room begins to warm with the low hum of dryers and the particular, comforting noise of women simply being together, unhurried, mid-morning, with nowhere else they would rather be. There is something almost ceremonial about it, this steady procession of familiar faces arriving in careful sequence, each one greeted, each one seated, each one folded gently back into the rhythm of the morning. It is not a place people come to be transformed exactly, not at 9 o'clock on an ordinary Tuesday. It is a place people come simply to be known, and in a week full of errands and obligations, that alone is enough to keep them coming back, year after year, chair after chair. Let's sit for a moment at the shampoo bowl, because this is where the day really begins to soften. You lean your head back into the cool curve of porcelain, and warm water runs slowly through your hair while someone else's fingers do all the work. There is something almost embarrassingly intimate about it. The small vulnerability of letting a stranger tilt your head, close your eyes, and simply take care of you for 5 quiet minutes. The water arrives in careful waves, never too hot, never too cold, adjusted by a hand that has done this 1,000 times before, and knows exactly how much pressure feels good against a scalp that has been carrying tension all week. You did not realize how tightly you were holding your shoulders until this very moment, until the warmth reaches the base of your neck and something in your chest finally lets go. The shampoo itself smells faintly of something floral, maybe rose, maybe lilac, a scent that clings to the whole salon by midday, but never quite loses its charm. It lathers slowly beneath fingertips that move in small deliberate circles, working from your temples down toward the crown of your head, patient in a way that nothing else in your week has been patient with you. You keep your eyes closed, partly out of habit, partly because opening them feels like it would break whatever spell has settled over the moment. There is conversation here too, though softer than in the chairs, quieter, almost private. The woman washing your hair asks how your week has been, and you find yourself answering more honestly than you expected to. Something about the strange vulnerability of lying back with your throat exposed, your face bare of any expression you might otherwise perform. It is easier to admit you are tired here, at the shampoo bowl, than almost anywhere else in your life. The rinse comes next, water running warm over your scalp, carrying the last of the lather down toward the drain in slow, easy spirals. You feel each strand of hair grow heavy with water, then lighter again as a towel is pressed gently against it, squeezing out the excess with a firmness that feels almost affectionate. There is a particular comfort in being handled this carefully by someone who is, in most other ways, still a stranger. Around you, other bowls are occupied too, other women tilted back in their own private moments of surrender. The room fills with the soft overlapping sound of running water, murmured conversation, and somewhere beneath it all, the low electric hum of a radio playing something slow enough to match the pace of the morning. It is the kind of quiet, communal stillness that is harder to find now, a room full of women all being cared for at once, none of them required to perform anything at all. When it is finally time to sit up, the world feels startlingly bright again, the ceiling swinging back into view, the noise of the salon rushing back in all at once. Your hair sits damp and heavy against your shoulders, and a fresh towel is wrapped around it, twisted gently into a turban that will stay in place just long enough to walk you back to your chair. There is a small, quiet transition in this walk from the shampoo bowl back to the mirror, a return from something almost meditative into the more social, more visible part of the appointment. But for those few minutes at the bowl, head tilted back, eyes closed, hands working gently through your hair, nothing was expected of you at all except to simply lie still and let yourself be taken care of. It is a small kindness, repeated every single day for every woman who walks through that door, and it is perhaps the truest heart of what a salon actually offers. Now it is time for the rollers, dozens of them, pink and blue and clear, lined up on a tray like tiny plastic soldiers. Each section of hair gets wound tight and pinned in place, and slowly your head transforms into something structural, almost architectural. It takes patience, both from the woman doing the winding and the woman sitting still beneath her hands, and there is a strange comfort in being turned, gently, into someone else's careful project. The stylist works in sections, parting your damp hair into neat squares with the tip of a comb, each one measured with an expertise that comes only from years of repetition. A section is combed smooth, wound around a roller from the ends up toward the scalp, and secured with a single metal pin that clicks softly into place. There is a rhythm to it. Comb, wind, pin, comb, wind, pin, steady as a heartbeat, and you find yourself falling into the pace of it, your own thoughts slowing to match. The rollers themselves come in careful sizes, the largest ones reserved for the crown, where volume matters most, the smallest tucked in near the temples and the nape of the neck, where the curl needs to be tighter, more controlled. Each size has its purpose, and the stylist selects them almost without looking, her hand already knowing which one belongs where before her eyes have even confirmed it. It is a kind of expertise that looks effortless, precisely because it has been practiced so many thousands of times. As the winding continues, your head grows heavier, roller by roller, until you can feel the weight of it settling into your neck, a strange, almost pleasant burden. You catch glimpses of yourself in the mirror as the transformation progresses, no longer quite recognizable, your familiar hair replaced by row after row of tight plastic cylinders, pinned in place like the scaffolding of some elaborate building still under construction. There is conversation happening around you, other stylists winding other heads at other stations, but much of it fades into background noise as you settle into the particular stillness this part of the appointment requires. You cannot move too much, cannot turn your head too quickly, without risking a roller coming loose or a pin poking uncomfortably against your scalp. And so you simply sit, hands folded in your lap, watching the transformation happen piece by piece in the mirror in front of you. Some rollers pull just slightly at the scalp as they are wound, a small tension that borders on discomfort without quite crossing into it. You have learned, over years of appointments, to welcome this small tightness, because it means the curl beneath it will hold, will last through the week ahead, through church on Sunday and dinner with the in-laws and whatever else the days demand of you. Beauty, you have come to understand, often requires this quiet, tolerable discomfort, and you have made your peace with it long ago. By the time the last roller clicks into place, your head sits crowned in neat, orderly rows, each one pinned with the same careful precision as the one before it. The stylist steps back for a moment, surveying her work with the satisfied eye of someone checking a finished puzzle, making sure nothing has been missed, no section left unwound. She reaches for a net, thin and nearly invisible, and stretches it carefully over the entire arrangement, tucking the edges beneath the front rollers to keep everything secure. You catch one last look at yourself before you are led toward the dryer, a strange temporary version of yourself, structured and contained, waiting patiently to be transformed once more. There is something almost funny about it, this in-between stage that no one outside the salon ever sees, and yet it is as much a part of the ritual as anything else, the necessary scaffolding beneath the finished, polished result that will eventually walk back out the door. It is time now to sit beneath the hood dryer, and this is where the whole salon seems to exhale. The heat wraps around your head in a low, steady roar, and for the next 45 minutes nobody expects anything of you at all. A magazine sits open on your lap, though you're not really reading it. It is the kind of forced stillness that is harder to find now, a pocket of the day that belongs to absolutely no one but you. The dryer itself lowers over your head like a great silver helmet, humming to life with a sound that is somehow both loud and soothing at once, a white noise that swallows up the rest of the room's chatter until it becomes only a distant murmur. The heat builds slowly, first gentle, then warmer, until you can feel it pressing steadily against your scalp through the rollers, drying each section from the inside out. You settle back into the chair, adjusting the small cushion behind your neck, and let your eyes drift half-closed. Around you, other women sit beneath their own dryers in a long row, each cocooned in her own private bubble of noise and heat, magazines open on laps that no one is really reading. There is something almost communal about this shared stillness, a row of women all pausing together, all momentarily excused from the demands of the day. The magazine on your lap features movie stars whose lives seem impossibly glamorous, actresses photographed at premieres in gowns that catch the light just so. You flip the pages slowly, more interested in the photographs than the text, occasionally pausing at an advertisement for a new shade of lipstick or a recipe for a casserole you will probably never make. It does not matter what the magazine actually says. It exists mostly as something for your hands to hold while your mind wanders elsewhere. And your mind does wander, drifting toward the grocery list still waiting at home, toward a phone call you need to return, toward the particular quality of light coming through the salon window this time of day. There is a rare luxury in being allowed to think about nothing in particular, sealed away beneath the dryer's hum, unreachable for these 45 minutes by husband or children, or the endless small obligations of an ordinary week. Every so often, a stylist checks beneath the hood, lifting it slightly to test a roller near your temple, gauging whether the heat has done its work yet. She says something brief and moves on, and you settle back once more into the warm, droning quiet. There is comfort in being checked on this way, cared for at intervals, without ever having to ask. The heat grows almost sleepy after a while, lulling you into a state somewhere between waking and dozing, your thoughts loosening at the edges the way they do just before sleep. You could drift off entirely here, if you let yourself, surrounded by the low roar of hot air and the distant, muffled sound of other women's conversations happening just beyond the dryer's hum. Some women do drift off, chins dipping slightly before they catch themselves, embarrassed, glancing around to see if anyone noticed. By the time the dryer clicks off and the hood lifts away, the world rushes back in all at once, brighter and louder than you remembered it being 45 minutes ago. Your head feels warm and light, the rollers baked into place, ready now for the careful unwinding that will reveal whatever shape they have created. You blink, stretch slightly, and fold the magazine closed, setting it aside for the next woman who will need it, the next 45 minutes of borrowed stillness waiting to begin all over again. Let's talk now about the perm, because for many women this was the real event of the visit. The solution has a smell you never quite forget, sharp and chemical, drifting through the whole salon the moment the first rod goes in. It stings the eyes a little, and everyone pretends not to notice. There is a bargain being made here. A few uncomfortable hours today in exchange for weeks of curls that need no work at all. The process begins with the rods themselves. Thin plastic cylinders even smaller than the rollers used for a simple set, each one wound tightly with a section of hair no wider than a fingertip. The stylist works with practiced speed, her hands moving quickly because the solution, once applied, cannot be left to sit too long or too little without consequence. There is a precision to this work that borders on chemistry, though it happens here in a beauty salon rather than a laboratory, with the same careful attention to timing and measurement. Once every rod is in place, the solution is applied with a small brush or a cotton swab, saturating each curl until it is thoroughly soaked. The smell rises immediately, sharp and unmistakable, filling not just your station but drifting several chairs down, prompting a few good-natured complaints from women who are not the ones getting the perm today. You breathe through your mouth for a while, eyes watering slightly, and remind yourself that the ends justify this particular, temporary misery. A plastic cap goes on next, stretched carefully over the entire arrangement of rods, sealing in the heat and the chemical process happening beneath it. You sit with this cap on for a set amount of time, the stylist checking her watch, sometimes an old wind-up timer ticking away on the counter nearby, marking the minutes with a patience that feels almost ceremonial. Too little time, and the curl will not hold. Too much, and the damage could be worse than a temporary sting in the eyes. Conversation continues around you, though perhaps a bit more subdued than usual, everyone aware of the strong chemical smell and unwilling to breathe too deeply while they talk. You flip through a magazine, though the words swim a little beneath the fumes, and you find yourself simply staring at the pictures instead, waiting for the timer to sound. When the time is finally up, the cap comes off, and you're led back to the shampoo bowl for a thorough rinse, the solution washed carefully from your hair before it can do any more work than intended. The water runs over the rod still in place, and you can feel your scalp cooling gradually as the chemical process comes to its end. There is relief in this rinse, a washing away of the sharp smell that has surrounded you for the better part of an hour. The rods themselves are unwound slowly afterward, one by one, revealing tight, springy curls that seem almost unbelievable compared to the straight, damp hair that went in. You watch in the mirror as your reflection changes shape entirely, transformed into something bouncier, fuller, more dramatic than you arrived with. There is a small thrill in this reveal, no matter how many times you've done it before, the surprise of seeing your own hair curl so tightly and hold so well. The stylist combs through gently, separating the curls, checking that each section has taken evenly, adjusting where needed with careful fingers. She holds up a hand mirror so you can see the back, turning your head slightly this way and that, both of you inspecting the finished result with the satisfaction of a job done well. The chemical smell still lingers faintly, though it fades more with each passing hour, replaced eventually by the familiar scent of your usual shampoo and the hairspray that will lock everything into place before you leave. You will carry this perm for weeks, waking each morning to curls that need only a light comb and a spritz of water to hold their shape. A small daily gift bought with this one uncomfortable afternoon. It is, in its own strange way, a fair trade, and every woman who has ever sat through it understands exactly why she keeps coming back to do it again. It is early afternoon now, and the salon has reached its loudest, warmest hour. Conversations overlap from chair to chair. Someone's daughter is getting married. Someone's neighbour put in a pool. Someone heard something about the man 2 doors down that nobody can quite confirm. It is the kind of gossip that never leaves the room and somehow leaves anyway, carried out the door in a dozen different purses by the end of the day. The stories move easily between stations, picked up by one chair and carried to the next, embellished slightly with each retelling, though never maliciously, more out of habit than intention. A woman getting her colour touched up mentions, almost in passing, that she saw an ambulance outside a house on her street last week, and within minutes 3 other women have offered their own theories, their own small pieces of information, until the story has grown into something far larger than the single, simple fact it started as. There is an unspoken understanding in all of this, that what gets said here exists in a strange protected space, spoken freely because everyone in the room is in some sense equally exposed. No one arrives at the salon fully put together, hair still damp or wound in rollers, faces bare of whatever makeup they will apply before stepping back out into the world. There is a levelling quality to this vulnerability that makes honest conversation easier, and gossip flows more freely here than it might at church or at the grocery store, where appearances still matter. Not all of it is idle talk either. Between the stories about neighbours and daughters, there is real information passed along too. Which doctor is taking new patients? Which grocery store just raised its prices? Which school is getting a new teacher in the fall? The salon functions, in its own way, as a kind of informal newspaper, its pages turned over one conversation at a time, its stories verified or debunked by the next woman who happens to know more. The stylists themselves participate carefully, offering just enough to keep the conversation moving without ever seeming to take sides or spread anything too far beyond these walls. They have learned, over years of standing behind these chairs, exactly how much to say and how much to simply nod along to professional listeners as much as professional hairdressers. Some of the best-kept secrets in town have passed through this room and gone no further, held quietly by women who understood, without being told, that some things are meant only for these 4 walls. Laughter breaks out every few minutes, sudden and genuine, rippling from one chair to the next as a joke lands or a particularly good piece of gossip reaches its punchline. It is the kind of laughter that comes easily when women gather without their husbands or children present, unguarded in a way that rarely happens elsewhere in an ordinary week. You find yourself laughing along too, even at stories about people you have never met simply swept up in the warmth of the room. By mid-afternoon, the gossip has touched nearly every corner of the neighbourhood, every family, every small drama unfolding just outside these doors, and yet none of it feels cruel, not really. More like a shared record-keeping, a way of staying connected to a community that might otherwise feel scattered and distant during the rest of the week. When you finally step back outside, the stories will scatter with you, carried home in fragments, repeated at your own kitchen table later that evening, passed along the same way they were passed to you. It is a kind of connection that is harder to find now, this steady flow of shared information, passed hand to hand, chair to chair, in a room full of women who trust each other, at least for the length of an appointment, with the small, ordinary secrets of their lives. Let's move now to the small table near the window, where manicures happen almost as an afterthought to everything else going on. Your hand rests palm up in someone else's, and the emery board makes a soft, rhythmic sound against your nails. The polish goes on in slow, careful strokes, and you're asked to hold still, to wait, to simply let something be done for you without doing anything at all in return. The manicurist works at a small table tucked into the corner near the front window, where the afternoon light falls just right across her workspace. A tray sits between you, lined with tiny bottles of polish in every shade imaginable, though most women here choose the same soft, practical reds and pinks they have worn for years. There is comfort in this consistency, in reaching for the familiar rather than the daring, though occasionally someone will surprise herself with a bolder shade, feeling a small thrill at the change. Your hand is soaked first in a small bowl of warm, soapy water, softening the skin before the real work begins. The manicurist lifts it out gently, patting it dry with a small towel before beginning with the emery board, shaping each nail with slow, even strokes. There is something almost hypnotic about the sound it makes, a soft, rasping rhythm that matches the unhurried pace of the whole appointment. Cuticles are pushed back carefully with a small metal tool, and you flinch only slightly at the occasional pinch, trusting that the discomfort is brief and purposeful. The manicurist works without looking up much, her attention entirely on your hand, though she carries on a conversation easily enough, asking about your week, your family, whether you have any special occasions coming up that might call for a particular shade. The base coat goes on first, a clear thin layer brushed carefully from the base of the nail to the tip, drying quickly in the warm afternoon air. Then comes the colour itself, applied in slow, deliberate strokes, the manicurist's hand steady in a way that yours rarely is when you attempt this at home. You watch, fascinated despite having seen it done 100 times before, as each nail transforms from bare to glossy, uniform, finished. There is a particular stillness required here, a stillness different from the one beneath the dryer, more active in its patience. You must hold your hand just so, fingers slightly spread, careful not to smudge the wet polish before it has had time to set. It forces a kind of pause into the day that few other moments do, a brief window where your hands, at least, have nothing left to do but wait. While one hand dries, the manicurist begins on the other, and you find yourself glancing occasionally out the window beside the table, watching the street outside go about its business, cars passing, a woman walking her dog, none of them aware of the small, careful transformation happening just behind the glass. There is something almost peaceful about this vantage point, connected to the world outside but held apart from its usual demands, at least for these 20 minutes. By the time both hands are finished, glossy and uniform, you hold them carefully in front of you, waiting for the final coat to dry completely before you dare touch anything at all. The manicurist offers a small fan, its gentle breeze speeding along the process, and you sit patiently, admiring the finished colour, already imagining how it will look against a dinner table candle or a church programme later in the week. It is a small luxury, this manicure, tucked in among the larger business of hair and curls, but it carries its own particular satisfaction, the quiet pleasure of 10 small, perfect details finished all at once, ready to be noticed by no one but yourself, and perhaps that is exactly enough. It is time now for the final comb out, and this is the moment the whole day has been quietly building toward. The rollers come out one by one, and what is left behind is teased, sprayed, and shaped into something that barely resembles the hair you walked in with. The mirror is turned toward you, and for a moment you sit very still, taking in a version of yourself that feels a little more finished than the one who arrived that morning. The stylist begins carefully, unclipping each pin and unwinding the rollers in the same order they went in, section by section, revealing tight, bouncy curls beneath. She works through your whole head this way, and slowly your hair grows from something structured and rigid into something soft and full, each curl settling gently into place as the pins release their hold. There is a small satisfaction in watching this transformation happen in reverse, the scaffolding of the morning giving way to the finished shape it was always building toward. Once every roller has been removed, she reaches for a comb with fine, wide teeth and begins the careful work of blending the curls together, easing them from tight separate spirals into a single flowing shape. This part requires patience and a practiced hand, teasing gently at the roots for volume, smoothing carefully at the ends for shine, working in small sections until the whole head begins to move as one, instead of dozens of individual curls competing for attention. The teasing itself is a small art form, the comb inserted near the scalp and pulled downward in short, quick strokes, building a soft cushion of volume beneath a smoother surface layer that will lie on top. You watch in the mirror as your hair seems to grow before your eyes, lifting and expanding into something fuller than it has looked all week. A kind of temporary architecture built entirely from teasing and spray. Once the shape has been built, the smoothing begins, the top layer combed gently over the teased volume beneath, hiding the structural work entirely beneath a polished glossy surface. The stylist checks the shape from every angle, tilting your head slightly this way and that, adjusting a curl here, smoothing a flyaway there, working with the quiet perfectionism of someone who takes real pride in getting the details exactly right. Finally comes the hairspray, a fine mist released in careful, sweeping passes, coating the entire style until it holds firm against whatever the rest of the day might bring. The smell is sharp and immediate, familiar by now after a whole afternoon spent in this salon, and you close your eyes instinctively as the spray settles over you, trusting that the result will be worth this last small cloud of chemical mist. When the stylist finally steps back, satisfied, she reaches for a hand mirror, angling it behind you so you can see the back of your head, the part you can never quite manage to check yourself at home. You turn slowly, taking in the finished shape from every side, noticing the way the light catches the curls, the way the whole style seems to sit just slightly taller, just slightly more polished than what you left the house with that morning. There is a particular kind of quiet satisfaction in this moment. The reveal at the end of hours of careful, patient work. You do not look like a stranger exactly, but you look like a more finished version of yourself. The kind of finished that takes a trained hand and a good deal of time to achieve. The stylist smiles, waiting for your reaction, and you smile back, genuinely pleased, already imagining how this shape will hold through the week ahead, through whatever ordinary demands are waiting for you just beyond the salon door. Let's end the day out on the sidewalk, stepping out of the cool, humming salon and back into the ordinary warmth of the afternoon. Your hair holds its shape against the breeze in a way that feels almost like armour. There's a particular kind of confidence that comes from walking out of that door, chin a little higher than when you walked in, carrying the quiet knowledge that for a few hours someone else's hands had made you feel entirely taken care of. The bell above the door rings once more as you step through it, the same small sound that marked the beginning of your appointment hours ago, now marking its end. The afternoon light feels different against your skin after so long spent beneath fluorescent bulbs and the warm glow of the dryer, brighter somehow, more immediate, though perhaps it is only your own perception that has shifted along with your hair. You catch your reflection once more in the salon's front window as you step past it, pausing just briefly to admire the shape from the outside, the way passers-by might see it. It looks different out here than it did in the mirror inside, somehow more real, more permanent, no longer just the product of careful hands and chemical solutions, but simply, now, your hair carried forward into the rest of your day. The street outside has grown busier since this morning. Cars parked along the curb, few more pedestrians moving between shops, the particular bustle of early afternoon settling over the block. None of them look twice at you, of course, though you feel, for a little while at least, as though you deserve a second glance, as though the hour spent in that chair have earned you some small temporary radiance the rest of the world simply has not noticed yet. You walk toward your car with a lighter step than you arrived with, your purse swinging slightly at your side, your hair holding firm against the light afternoon breeze exactly the way the stylist promised it would. There is something almost ceremonial about this walk, a small procession from the private ritual of the salon back into the public demands of the rest of your day. Groceries still waiting to be bought, dinner still waiting to be made, a household that has continued on without you for these few borrowed hours. But you carry something back with you beyond just the finished hairstyle. There is a particular calm that lingers after an appointment like this, a residue of having been cared for, listened to, allowed to sit still and simply be tended to for an entire afternoon. It is not something you could easily explain to anyone who has never experienced it, this quiet, restorative quality that a few hours in a beauty salon chair can offer a woman in the middle of an otherwise ordinary week. As you drive home, you glance in the rearview mirror more than once, checking the shape of your hair, still a little amazed at how different you look, how put together, how ready for whatever the rest of the week might ask of you. It will not last forever, of course. By the end of the week, the curls will soften, the volume will settle, and you will begin counting the days until your next appointment, until you can sit once more beneath those familiar dryers and let someone else's careful hands take over for just a little while. But for now, driving home in the golden light of early afternoon, hair still smelling faintly of hairspray and rose-scented shampoo, you feel entirely, temporarily, wonderfully put together, carrying the whole quiet ritual of the day home with you, tucked away until it is time to return. It is early afternoon now, and the back corner of the salon has its own quiet rhythm. The colour bar, lined with bottles and bowls and the faint chemical sweetness of dye mixing with developer. A woman sits with foils folded carefully into sections of her hair, patient as a photograph waiting to develop, trusting that what comes out from under the plastic cap will be worth the wait. The colourist works with a small bowl balanced in one hand, a brush in the other, mixing shades with the practised eye of someone who has learned, through years of trial, exactly how much of one tone will balance another. She dips the brush and paints it carefully along a narrow section of hair, laying a strip of foil beneath it before folding the whole thing up tight, sealing the colour against the heat that will help it take. The process repeats, section after section, until the woman's head is covered in neat rows of silver squares, each one holding its own small secret beneath the surface. There is a particular kind of trust required at the colour bar that does not quite exist anywhere else in the salon. A haircut can be undone in time by simple growth. A curl will loosen within a week regardless. But colour is different, more permanent in its risk, and the woman sitting here has placed her faith entirely in the colourist's judgment, in her steady hand and her careful eye for undertone and balance. She does not watch closely as it happens. She has learned over the years that watching only makes the wait feel longer. The smell of the developer mixes with the dye in a way that is sharper than the shampoo, sharper even than the perm solution across the room, and it settles over this corner of the salon like its own small weather system. Other women passing by wrinkle their noses slightly, though none of them complain because they too have sat in this chair before, foils folded against their own scalp, waiting out this same particular discomfort in exchange for hair that looks, for a few weeks at least, entirely renewed. Conversation at the colour bar tends to run quieter than elsewhere in the salon, perhaps because the process itself demands a certain stillness, or perhaps because women getting their colour done are often thinking about something a little more private than gossip, a birthday approaching, a bit of grey they're quietly trying to outrun, a photograph coming up that they would like to look their best for. The colourist senses this and adjusts her conversation accordingly, offering company without demanding much in return. Once the foils are all in place, a small timer is set, and the waiting begins in earnest. The woman sits with her head full of silver squares, catching her own reflection every so often, and smiling faintly at how strange she looks, transformed temporarily into something almost mechanical, a woman built of foil and patience. She flips through a magazine without really reading it, her mind drifting instead toward the finished result, imagining the way the new colour will catch the light, the way it might make her look just a little younger, a little more like the woman she remembers being. When the timer finally sounds, the colourist checks a small strand first, unwrapping one foil carefully to examine the colour underneath, judging by eye whether it has developed enough or needs a few more minutes. Satisfied, she leads the woman back to the shampoo bowl, where the foils are unwound one by one and the excess colour rinsed carefully away, the water running faintly tinted before eventually running clear. What emerges afterward, once the hair is towel dried and combed through, is almost always a small revelation, richer, more even, more alive than the hair that walked in that afternoon. The woman studies her reflection carefully, turning her head this way and that beneath the salon lights, searching for any sign of unevenness and finding, more often than not, exactly the colour she had hoped for. There is real relief in this moment, a held breath finally released. She thanks the colourist warmly, already scheduling her next appointment before she has even left the chair, because colour like this does not last forever, and she has learned, through years of visits just like this one, exactly how many weeks she can go before the grey begins creeping back in at the roots, quietly reminding her that it's nearly time to return. Let's pause for a moment by the magazine rack near the waiting chairs. Dog-eared copies spread across a low table, months old but somehow never quite out of date. Women flip through them absent-mindedly while they wait their turn, less interested in the articles than in the photographs of hairstyles clipped and folded at the corner, silently marked as this one may be, for next time. The rack itself is nothing fancy, just a simple wooden stand tucked beside the waiting chairs, holding a modest collection of magazines that have clearly passed through many hands before yours. Some covers are soft at the corners from repeated folding, others have small coffee rings staining the glossy paper, evidence of countless mornings spent exactly like this one, waiting for a chair to open up. No one seems to mind the wear. If anything, it makes the magazines feel more like part of the salon itself, worn soft by use the way a favourite chair grows comfortable with time. A woman settles into the waiting area, purse held in her lap, and reaches for whatever magazine sits closest to hand, not particularly choosy about which one, since most of them offer the same mix of celebrity photographs, recipe suggestions, and advertisements for products she will probably never buy. She flips through slowly, pausing longer on some pages than others, her attention caught more by the images than the text beneath them. The hairstyle photographs draw the most careful attention. A woman will stop entirely at a page showing some actress with her hair swept up in an elegant twist, studying the shape of it, imagining briefly how it might look on her own head, wondering if her stylist could recreate something similar. Sometimes she folds the corner of the page down, marking it quietly for later, a small private note to herself that she might mention it when she finally settles into her chair. There is something almost aspirational about these pages, a glimpse into a version of glamour that feels just slightly out of reach for an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and yet close enough to imagine borrowing a piece of it. The recipes get a similar kind of attention, women pausing over a photograph of a casserole or a moulded gelatin salad, mentally filing away the ingredients, wondering if her family might actually eat it if she tried making it this weekend. The advertisements scattered throughout offer their own small entertainment, promises of youthful skin and effortless beauty routines, of household products that will supposedly transform a woman's entire day. Some women read these with a skeptical eye, having learned through experience not to trust every claim printed on a glossy page. Others read them with a flicker of hope, wondering if this particular cream or that particular gadget might actually be the one that delivers on its promise. Conversation sometimes drifts around the magazine rack too, one woman showing another a photograph she's found particularly striking, asking what she thinks, whether it might suit her face shape or the texture of her hair. There's a small camaraderie in this shared browsing, strangers momentarily united by the same glossy pages, offering opinions freely because nothing here carries any real weight or consequence. Children, when they are brought along, tend to gravitate toward these same magazines too, flipping through them with far less patience than their mothers, more interested in the bright colours than any particular photograph, until they grow bored and wander instead toward whatever toy or colouring book has been tucked into a corner of the waiting area, specifically for this purpose. Eventually a name is called, and the magazine gets set back down on the low table, page folded or not, left behind for the next woman to pick up and continue exactly where the last one left off. It will sit there for weeks, maybe months, passed from hand to hand, page after page slowly softening with use, until eventually a fresh stack arrives to replace it. The old one's quietly retired, though the ritual itself never changes, waiting women reaching for whatever magazine sits closest, searching for a photograph worth folding down, worth remembering, worth bringing up when the chair finally opens and it is at last their turn. It is midday now, and the wash and set has become its own quiet ceremony, one that some women have kept every single week for years without missing a single appointment. There is comfort in repetition, in knowing exactly how the chair will feel, exactly how long the dryer will hum, exactly how your hair will look when you leave, unchanged in the best possible way. The woman in the chair today has come every Wednesday at 11 o'clock for as long as anyone at the salon can remember, her appointment penciled into the book so far in advance that it has practically become permanent, a fixture of the schedule the way the coffee pot or the front desk itself has become a fixture of the room. She does not need to discuss what she wants. The stylist already knows, has known for years exactly the shape and size and style she prefers, adjusted only slightly with the changing seasons or the occasional special occasion. She settles into the chair with the particular ease of someone who has done this so many times that her body simply knows the motions, leaning back automatically when the cape is fastened, tilting her head without being asked when it is time for the shampoo bowl. There is a kind of grace in this familiarity, a woman and a stylist who have worked together so long that very little needs to be said at all. The communication happening instead through small gestures, a slight nod, a light touch guiding her head this way or that. The wash itself follows the same steady rhythm as always. Warm water, familiar shampoo, fingers working through her scalp in exactly the pattern she has come to expect and, in some small way, to depend upon. She closes her eyes through most of it, not out of any particular need for privacy, but simply because she has done this so many times that closing her eyes feels like the natural thing to do, a small ritual within the larger ritual of the appointment itself. The set that follows is equally familiar, the same size rollers in the same careful arrangement, wound with the quick, confident hands of someone who could likely do this particular head of hair, blindfolded by now. There is very little conversation needed to guide the process, though plenty of conversation happens anyway, the two of them falling easily into whatever topic the week has brought, a grandchild's visit, a church function, a small complaint about the weather that neither of them takes too seriously. Beneath the dryer, she settles into the same magazine she reads every week, or perhaps a different one, though it hardly matters, since she's rarely reading closely anyway, more interested in the familiar hum of heat and noise than in whatever words happen to be printed on the page in front of her. This is her hour, carved carefully out of an otherwise busy week, and she guards it the way some people guard a Sunday afternoon nap, unwilling to let anything interrupt it. When the dryer finally clicks off and the rollers come out, the shape that emerges is, as always, almost identical to the shape from last week and the week before that, stretching back through years of these same Wednesday appointments. There is no surprise in the reveal, no dramatic transformation, only the quiet satisfaction of consistency, of a woman who knows exactly who she is and exactly how she likes to look, unwilling to chase every passing trend when this particular style has served her so faithfully for so long. The stylist finishes with a light spray, checking the shape from every angle out of habit rather than necessity, since she already knows it is correct, has known it would be correct before she even began. The woman studies her reflection with the same calm satisfaction she feels every single week, nods once, and reaches for her purse, already looking forward in some quiet way to next Wednesday, when this same comfortable ritual will begin all over again exactly as it always has. Let's turn now to the woman sitting a little stiffly in the waiting chair, her first time here, unsure which stylist to ask for or how loudly she's allowed to talk. She watches the room carefully, the way people talk to each other, the easy laughter passed between chairs, and quietly hopes that by her second visit she will belong here too. She arrived a few minutes early, unsure of the salon's particular customs, whether she should announce herself right away at the front desk or simply wait to be called. She chose a chair near the window, close enough to observe the room without feeling too exposed, and has spent the last several minutes quietly taking everything in, the layout of the stations, the particular rhythm of the place, trying to understand without asking how everything here is supposed to work. Her friend recommended this salon after her usual place closed down unexpectedly, praising the stylists warmly, insisting she would love it here just as much. But recommendations only carry a person so far, and now, sitting in this unfamiliar waiting area, she feels the small nervousness of anyone starting something new, unsure whether the chemistry that worked for her friend will work equally well for her. She watches one of the regulars settle into her chair with such effortless familiarity, greeted by name, offered coffee without having to ask, already deep in conversation before her coat is even off, and she feels a small pang of something like envy, wondering how long it takes to earn that kind of easy belonging. She reminds herself that everyone in this room was once new too, sitting exactly where she is sitting now, though it does little to fully calm the small flutter of nerves in her chest. When her name is finally called, she rises a little too quickly, smoothing her skirt, and follows the stylist toward an open chair, trying to appear more confident than she feels. The stylist introduces herself warmly, asking a few careful questions, what she usually has done, what she's hoping for today, whether she has any particular concerns about her hair. The woman answers honestly, grateful for the structure the questions provide, grateful not to have to guess at what she's supposed to say. As the shampoo begins, she finds herself relaxing slightly, the familiar comfort of warm water and gentle hands working the same magic here as it did at her old salon, a small reassurance that some things, at least, remain consistent no matter where you go. She closes her eyes and allows herself, just briefly, to stop worrying about whether she belongs and simply enjoy the moment for what it is. Conversation flows more easily than she expected once the appointment gets underway. The stylist asking about her family, her work, the neighbourhood she has just moved into, each question offered gently, without pressure, giving her room to answer as much or as little as she likes. By the time the rollers go in, she is already relaxed considerably, laughing once at something the stylist said, surprising herself with how natural it felt. Beneath the dryer, she watches the room a little more openly now, no longer quite so worried about being noticed, simply curious about the small dramas and conversations unfolding around her. She catches snippets of gossip she does not fully understand yet, names she does not recognize, but she listens anyway, filing it away, aware that in time these unfamiliar names will become familiar too. By the time she leaves, hair finished and glossy, she feels considerably more at ease than when she arrived, already looking forward, in some small way, to her next appointment. She thanks the stylist warmly, schedules a return visit before she's even reached the door, and steps back out into the afternoon with the quiet, hopeful feeling of someone who has just taken the first small step toward belonging somewhere new. It is early afternoon, and a mother sits in the waiting area while her daughter gets her first real haircut, the kind that signals something is changing. The girl watches her ponytail fall to the floor with wide eyes, somewhere between excitement and loss, while her mother pretends not to notice how grown up she suddenly looks in the mirror. The girl has been asking for this haircut for weeks, tired of the same long, simple style she has worn since childhood, eager for something that feels a little more her own, a little more grown up. Her mother agreed reluctantly, after enough persistent asking, though she has spent the drive over quietly mourning, in some small private way, the loss of the long hair she has brushed and braided for so many years. The stylist greets the girl warmly, treating her with the same careful respect she offers any adult customer, asking what she has in mind, showing her photographs from a magazine to help clarify exactly what kind of shape she's hoping for. The girl points to a picture with visible pride, delighted to finally be consulted about her own hair rather than simply told what to do with it. The cape goes on, a little large for her still small shoulders, and she settles into the chair with a mixture of nervous excitement, glancing occasionally toward her mother in the waiting area, seeking reassurance without quite wanting to admit she needs it. Her mother offers a small smile back, though her own chest tightens slightly at the sight of her daughter looking so grown, so ready to make decisions about her own appearance. The shampoo happens much the same as it would for anyone, though the girl giggles slightly at the sensation, unused yet to the particular vulnerability of lying back with her throat exposed, water running warm through her hair. The stylist chats easily with her throughout, asking about school, about friends, treating her the way she might treat any customer, and the girl beams at being taken so seriously. When it is finally time for the scissors, the stylist takes a moment to section the hair carefully, showing the girl in the mirror exactly where the first cut will happen, giving her a final chance to change her mind. The girl nods firmly, decision made, and the first long section falls away, landing softly on the cape before sliding to the floor below. The girl watches it fall with an expression caught somewhere between delight and a small, sudden uncertainty, as though only now fully realizing the permanence of what she has just done. Her mother, watching from across the room, feels her own throat tighten unexpectedly at the sight of that first long piece hitting the floor, a small tangible symbol of a childhood slipping quietly away, replaced by whatever comes next. She says nothing, only watches, understanding that this moment belongs to her daughter and not to her own quiet nostalgia. The stylist continues carefully, shaping the cut section by section, checking the length against the girl's shoulders, against her chin, adjusting until the shape begins to match the photograph she pointed to earlier. The girl watches every movement in the mirror with rapt attention, fascinated by her own transformation, turning her head slightly whenever the stylist allows to catch a glimpse from a new angle. When the cut is finally finished, the stylist spins the chair slowly so the girl can see the whole effect, and she gasps audibly, delighted, reaching up to touch the ends of her newly shortened hair as though checking that it is real. She turns immediately to find her mother, seeking her reaction, and her mother rises from her chair, crossing the room with a smile that hides just barely the small ache underneath it. "You look beautiful," her mother says, and means it entirely, even as she quietly mourns, just a little, the long-haired child who walked in earlier that same afternoon, already gone, replaced by this bright-eyed, more grown-up version stepping confidently down from the chair. Let's notice for a moment the small radio sitting on the shelf near the register, playing low enough to be background but present enough that everyone half knows the words. A song comes on that someone recognises, and for a few seconds the whole room hums along without quite meaning to, strangers connected briefly by the same familiar tune. The radio itself is nothing special. A simple boxy set with a single dial and an antenna bent slightly from years of adjustment, tucked onto a shelf where it has sat for as long as anyone can remember. It plays throughout the entire day, rarely turned off, its steady presence woven so completely into the fabric of the salon that most days no one even consciously notices it. The way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator after living beside it long enough. But every so often, a particular song comes on, something with a familiar melody, a chorus that everyone in the room seems to know without quite remembering when they learned it, and the whole space shifts slightly. Conversations pausing mid-sentence as women catch themselves humming along, despite their best efforts to stay focused on whatever they were discussing. It is a small, involuntary kind of unity. Strangers connected suddenly by nothing more than shared memory and a familiar tune drifting from a small speaker near the register. Sometimes a woman will sing along more openly, not loudly, just enough to be noticed, and this small boldness often invites others to join in too, voices overlapping quietly beneath the hum of the dryers, none of them particularly talented singers, but none of them especially concerned about that fact either. There is something freeing about singing quietly in a room full of women who are all in some sense equally exposed, hair still wet or wound in rollers, faces bare of whatever composure they might carry out in public. The stylists know the radio schedule almost as well as their own appointment books, aware of which programs come on at which hours, which songs tend to repeat throughout the week, which advertisements everyone has heard so many times that they could recite them from memory without even trying. Occasionally a stylist will reach over to adjust the volume slightly, turning it up when a particularly good song comes on, turning it down again when the static grows too heavy, or the program shifts to something less interesting. News breaks in every so often too, brief and businesslike between the songs, and the room grows momentarily quieter as women half listen, catching a headline or two before the music resumes and conversation picks back up where it left off. It's a strange kind of background awareness, the whole world's larger events filtering into this small, warm room in brief snippets, never quite disrupting the more immediate business of hair and gossip and quiet companionship. Advertisements drift through too, jingles for products most of the women in the room have already purchased a dozen times over, laundry soap and coffee and household cleaners, each one accompanied by a short, catchy tune that some of the younger stylists find themselves humming absent-mindedly hours after their shift has ended, unable to fully shake it loose from memory. By late afternoon, the radio has become such a constant companion to the day's rhythm that its absence would feel almost startling, a silence too large and too strange for a room this full of voices and dryers and running water. It fills the small gaps between conversations, provides a soundtrack to the shampooing and the perming, and the long, patient minutes beneath the dryer, asking nothing of anyone, simply present, the way an old friend is present, familiar and comforting without ever needing to be the centre of attention. And when, every so often, that one particular song comes on, the one everyone seems to know, The whole room joins together for just a few seconds in something unspoken and unplanned. Women who arrived as strangers this morning humming the same tune, bound together briefly by nothing more than a small radio and a melody none of them can quite resist. It is early afternoon now, and your stylist finally gets a few minutes to herself, perched on a stool in the back room with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She eats quickly, half listening for the bell above the door, because in this line of work, rest is always borrowed time, never quite yours to keep. The back room is small and unglamorous compared to the polished mirrored space out front, lined with shelves of supplies, spare towels, extra bottles of solution waiting to be used. A single stool sits tucked in the corner, worn soft from years of brief hurried breaks just like this one, and she settles onto it now with a particular relief of someone who has been standing since 8 o'clock that morning without much of a pause. Her sandwich, prepared hastily before she left home, sits wrapped in wax paper exactly the way her mother used to pack her lunch for school, a habit she never quite grew out of. She unwraps it carefully, aware of the limited time she has before her next appointment arrives, and takes a first bite standing partly upright, already anticipating the moment she might need to abandon the rest of it entirely if the bell rings sooner than expected. Through the doorway she can still hear the salon continuing on without her, the low hum of dryers, the murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter from someone's joke landing well in one of the front chairs. She listens with half an ear, professional habit keeping her alert even during this brief pause, ready to step back out the moment she is needed, though for now at least the room seems to be managing fine without her direct attention. She thinks, chewing slowly, about the morning she's already had, the perm that took a little longer than expected, the new customer who seemed nervous but left, she hoped, feeling more at ease. There is a particular satisfaction in this work that she rarely has time to fully appreciate during the rush of an ordinary day, and these few stolen minutes offer her a rare chance to actually reflect on it, however briefly. Another stylist joins her a few minutes later, settling onto an overturned crate near the shelves, her own lunch equally hurried, equally modest. The two of them talk quietly, comparing notes on the day so far, laughing softly about a particularly demanding customer from earlier that morning, the kind of shared, knowing laughter that only makes sense between two people who understand exactly the same daily pressures. There is a camaraderie among the stylists that develops naturally from working so closely together, day after day, standing on their feet for hours at a stretch, managing not just hair but the emotional needs of every woman who sits down in their chair. They trade small pieces of advice here too, a suggestion for handling a particularly stubborn cowlick, a new product one of them has tried and liked, the kind of practical knowledge passed easily between people who share the same trade. The break never lasts quite as long as either of them would like. A voice calls from the front announcing that the next appointment has arrived, and the stylist rises from her stool, folding the remaining half of her sandwich back into its wax paper for later, tucking it onto a shelf where it will likely sit forgotten until the end of the day. She smooths her apron, checks her reflection quickly in a small mirror propped against the wall, and steps back out into the front room, already smiling, already fully present again for whoever is waiting. It is a small, quiet kind of labour that customers rarely think much about, the constant motion required to keep a salon running smoothly all day long, but it is real work nonetheless, demanding both physical stamina and emotional patience in equal measure. And yet, watching her step back out onto the floor, greeting her next customer with the same warmth she offered the one before, you would never guess she had only just finished half a hurried sandwich in the back room, already back to giving her full attention to someone else's hair, someone else's small piece of the afternoon. Let's sit for a while with a perm timer, an old wind-up clock ticking steadily on the counter, marking exactly how long the rods must stay in before real damage could begin. Everyone in the salon seems to keep half an ear on it, a small shared anxiety that this particular chemical reaction should not be rushed. The timer itself is nothing elaborate, just a simple kitchen clock repurposed for salon use, its face slightly yellowed with age, its tick audible even beneath the hum of the dryers if you listen closely enough. It sits on the counter near the perm station, wound carefully each time a new client settles in for the process, set to exactly the number of minutes the solution requires before it can safely be rinsed away. There is something almost hypnotic about its steady ticking, a small mechanical heartbeat marking the passage of time in a room where minutes otherwise tend to blur together beneath the noise and conversation. The stylist glances at it periodically throughout the process, not obsessively, but with the practiced awareness of someone who has learned, through experience, exactly how costly it can be to lose track of those minutes entirely. Too little time, and the curl will simply fall flat within days, a disappointing result after all the effort and discomfort involved in getting it done. Too much time, and the damage could be lasting, hair left brittle and over-processed, a mistake that cannot be undone with a simple reapplication. The timer then carries real weight despite its humble appearance, a small clock responsible for the difference between success and failure. The woman sitting beneath the plastic cap, rods wound tightly against her scalp, watches the timer too, her own private countdown running alongside the stylist's professional awareness. She feels the solution working faintly against her scalp, a subtle tingling sensation that grows slightly more noticeable as the minutes pass, and she resists the urge to ask, every few minutes, exactly how much time remains. Other stylists working nearby keep half an ear on the timer as well, aware that whoever is managing this particular perm cannot always watch the clock every single second, especially if she becomes absorbed in conversation or distracted by some other small task. There is an unspoken agreement among the staff that everyone shares responsibility for tracking these things, a quiet system of mutual accountability built from years of working alongside each other. When the timer finally begins its final approach, the stylist grows more attentive, checking a test strand a few minutes early just to be sure, unwilling to let the full time elapse if the curl has already taken sufficiently. She unwraps one small section carefully, examining it beneath the light, judging by touch and appearance whether the chemical process has done its work. If it needs more time, she rewraps it and waits. If it looks ready, she moves quickly, unwilling to let even a few unnecessary minutes pass once the desired result has been achieved. The final ring of the timer, when it comes, carries a small note of relief for everyone within earshot. The woman in the chair, the stylist managing the process, even the other clients nearby who have absorbed some small portion of this shared anxiety without quite meaning to. It signals that the waiting is over, that the careful chemistry has run its intended course, and that it is now time for the equally careful work of rinsing, neutralizing, and revealing whatever curl pattern has been created underneath. There is a reason this small clock holds such quiet authority in a room otherwise filled with easy conversation and casual gossip. It represents precision in a business that otherwise feels warm and unhurried, a reminder that beneath all the comfortable ritual, real chemistry is at work, requiring exactly the right amount of patience, no more, no less, ticked out steadily by an old wind-up clock that has, by now, overseen more perms than anyone in the room could possibly count. It is a special morning, and the whole salon seems to know it, because today a bride is getting ready for her afternoon wedding, chair pulled slightly apart from the others, flowers waiting in a box nearby. There is a hush of excitement in the room, stylists working a little more carefully, aware that today's work will live on in photographs for decades. The bride arrived earlier than her usual appointment time, mother in tow, both of them slightly breathless with the particular nervous energy that only a wedding morning can produce. Her chair has been set apart deliberately, angled just slightly away from the others, giving her a small measure of privacy for what everyone in the room understands to be an unusually important occasion. A box of flowers sits waiting nearby, delivered earlier that morning, small white blooms meant to be woven carefully into whatever style the day calls for. The stylist assigned to her is clearly prepared in advance, consulting beforehand about the dress, the veil, the particular shape the bride has been imagining for months now, torn from a magazine page and carried in her purse until the paper softened at the folds. There is no room for improvisation today, no casual adjustment partway through. Everything has been discussed, planned, agreed upon well before this morning arrived. The shampoo happens with unusual gentleness, the stylist aware of how carefully this particular head of hair must be handled. How much rests on getting every detail exactly right. The bride closes her eyes through most of it, though her mind is clearly elsewhere, running through the schedule of the day ahead. The ceremony, the reception, the 100 small details still requiring her attention before evening arrives. As the rollers go in, mother and daughter fall into a conversation quieter and more tender than usual, the kind of talk that happens only on mornings like this one. Memories exchanged softly between them, a small laugh over some forgotten detail from years ago. The stylist works around them, present but unobtrusive, understanding instinctively that this moment belongs first to the two of them and only secondarily to the hair itself. Beneath the dryer, the bride does not read her magazine at all, staring instead at some middle distance, lost in her own thoughts, occasionally catching her mother's eye and smiling in a way that says more than words could manage. Other clients elsewhere in the salon glance over occasionally, aware of what is happening, offering small smiles of their own, a shared recognition of the particular significance of this ordinary Tuesday for one woman among them. When the rollers finally come out, the stylist works with unusual precision, building the shape slowly, checking it repeatedly against the photograph tucked now onto the counter beside her station, adjusting a curl here, a pin there, unwilling to rush even slightly toward the finished result. The flowers are woven in last, small white blooms tucked carefully among the curls, transforming the whole arrangement into something that looks, finally, exactly like the picture the bride has carried for months. When the mirror is finally turned toward her, the bride goes very still, studying her reflection for a long moment before her eyes fill with sudden tears, careful not to let them fall and disturb the makeup she's not yet even applied. Her mother reaches for her hand, both of them overwhelmed in the particular quiet way that only a wedding morning produces, and the stylist steps back, allowing them this moment, satisfied entirely by the sight of her work landing exactly as intended. The whole salon seems to exhale slightly as the bride finally rises from the chair, gathering her things carefully, thanking everyone within earshot with a warmth that carries the whole morning's emotion behind it. She steps out the door toward whatever waits for her that afternoon, carrying with her not just a finished hairstyle but a small piece of this room's collective goodwill, offered freely, the way it always is, to any bride lucky enough to sit in that chair on her wedding morning. Let's listen now to the conversation drifting between two chairs near the window, women discussing which grocery store finally got a new manager, whose husband got a promotion, whose son is off to college in the fall. None of it feels like gossip exactly, more like the quiet bookkeeping of a neighbourhood, kept current one appointment at a time. The two women in question have known each other for years, though not especially well outside these walls, their friendship existing almost entirely within the particular boundaries of this salon, renewed and refreshed appointment after appointment, without ever quite extending into dinners or visits at each other's homes. It is a friendship built on convenience and familiarity rather than deep intimacy, and yet it carries real warmth nonetheless, the kind that only comes from years of shared, comfortable conversation. One mentions, almost in passing, that the grocery store on Main Street has finally hired a new manager after the old one retired last month, and the other leans forward with real interest, wanting every detail, whether the new prices have changed, whether the produce section has improved, small practical concerns that matter more to the daily rhythm of their households than almost anything printed in the newspaper that morning. The conversation shifts easily from there, the way these conversations always do, toward news of a husband's recent promotion, celebrated with genuine warmth, even though the woman sharing it is careful not to seem as though she is bragging, offering the information instead almost apologetically, softened by a small joke about how it only means he will be working even longer hours now. Her companion offers congratulations, sincere despite the casual delivery, understanding the particular etiquette required in sharing good news without appearing to gloat. Talk of children comes next, inevitable in a room full of mothers, one mentioning with a mixture of pride and quiet sadness that her son will be leaving for college in the fall, the first of her children to go, and she's not entirely certain yet how she feels about the house growing quieter. Her companion nods with real understanding, having been through this exact transition herself a few years back, offering small, practical reassurances about how the adjustment, while difficult at first, does eventually settle into something manageable. There is no unkindness in any of this conversation, no sharp edges the way gossip sometimes carries elsewhere. It functions instead as a kind of quiet accounting, a way of keeping track of a neighbourhood's slow, steady changes, who has moved, who has left, who is celebrating something new, who is quietly adjusting to some small loss. Information passes between these two women not to be spread further, but simply to be shared, acknowledged, understood by someone else who inhabits the same small corner of the world. The stylist working nearby catches pieces of this conversation too, adding an occasional comment of her own, since she too lives in this same neighbourhood, shops at the same grocery store, has children who attend the same schools. There is no real separation here between customer and stylist when it comes to this kind of talk. Everyone simply neighbours first, professional roles secondary to the shared experience of living in the same small community. By the time both women's appointments draw to a close, they have covered nearly every notable happening from the past several weeks, each piece of news received, discussed, and quietly filed away for the next conversation, whenever that might happen to be. There is a kind of comfort in this steady, unhurried exchange, of a reminder that a neighbourhood's real pulse is often kept not in any newspaper, but in exactly this kind of small, ordinary conversation, passed quietly between chairs, one appointment at a time, keeping everyone just a little more connected than they might otherwise be. It is late afternoon now, and the salon has entered its slower hour, the rush of the morning appointments finished, the evening crowd not yet arrived. A stylist sweeps loose hair into a pile near her station, unhurried, humming quietly, grateful for a few minutes where the room asks nothing more of her. The chairs sit mostly empty now, just one or two still occupied, conversation drifting low and easy in a way that matches the slower pace of the hour. The morning's energy, so bright and busy just a few hours earlier, has settled into something gentler, quieter, the whole salon exhaling after a full day's worth of shampoos and sets and careful, patient work. The stylist moves through this lull with a broom in hand, gathering the day's accumulated hair into small colourful piles, blonde mixed with grey, mixed with the occasional deep brunette, evidence of every woman who has passed through her chair since the morning began. She works without hurry, taking a small satisfaction in restoring some order to her station before the evening crowd arrives and undoes all of it again. Sunlight slants through the front window at a different angle now than it did in the morning. Warmer somehow, softer, catching the dust motes drifting lazily through the air near the register. The whole room feels bathed in this particular late afternoon light, a quality that seems to exist nowhere else quite the same way, familiar to anyone who has ever spent an entire day inside the same four walls, watching the light shift slowly from one part of the room to another as the hours pass. The radio continues its steady hum in the background, though even it seems to have settled into a quieter register this time of day, the fast, cheerful jingles of the morning replaced by something slower, more contemplative, matching the mood of the room without anyone consciously adjusting the dial. The stylist hums along absently, her broom moving in slow, easy strokes across the floor. A few of the other stylists use this lull to restock their stations, refilling bottles of setting lotion, wiping down counters, sharpening scissors that have grown slightly dull over the course of the day's many appointments. There is a domestic quality to this work, small and unglamorous, the kind of maintenance that customers rarely think about, but that keeps the whole operation running smoothly day after day. One stylist takes advantage of the quiet to finally sit for a few minutes, resting her feet after hours of standing, flipping idly through one of the salon's own worn magazines, the same ones her customers read while waiting. She reads with a different kind of attention than they do, though, less interested in the celebrity photographs and more curious about the newest hairstyles pictured, wondering if she might suggest one to a client next week. The front door opens occasionally during this lull, a woman stopping in briefly to schedule an appointment for later in the week, or simply to pick up a bottle of the salon's own recommended shampoo before continuing on with her afternoon errands. These brief visits punctuate the quiet without truly disrupting it, small ripples across an otherwise calm surface. By the time the afternoon light begins its slow shift toward evening, the stylists have mostly finished their small maintenance tasks, stations restocked, floors swept clean, everything reset and ready for whatever the evening crowd might bring. There's a particular satisfaction in this quiet, unglamorous work, a reminder that behind every polished, finished hairstyle lies a great deal of steady, unseen effort, carried out patiently, hour after hour, day after day, by women who take real pride in keeping this small, warm room running exactly as it should. Let's turn to the woman who has had the same Wednesday appointment for 15 years, ever since she retired and decided the salon would be her one unmovable plan each week. She does not need much done, just a trim and a set, but she comes anyway, mostly for the conversation and the feeling of being expected somewhere. She arrives at exactly the same time every week, 10 minutes early if anything, settling into the same waiting chair out of habit, even though her appointment rarely runs late enough to require much waiting at all. 15 years is a long time to keep any single commitment so faithfully, but she has never once considered giving it up. Not through illness, not through the occasional bad weather that might have discouraged someone less devoted, not even through the years when her husband was still alive and might have preferred her company at home instead. The stylist who has cared for her hair through all these years knows her routine so completely that very little discussion is needed before they begin. A trim, just enough to keep the ends neat, and a set in the same shape she has worn for as long as anyone can remember. A style that suits her, that she has never seen any particular reason to change, even as fashions around her have shifted through the decades. What she comes for, really, has very little to do with her hair at all, though she would never quite put it that way if asked directly. She comes because this hour, every single Wednesday, gives her somewhere to be, someone expecting her, a small structure carved into a week that otherwise, since retirement, has sometimes felt a little too open, a little too unstructured for her liking. The conversation between her and her stylist has grown, over 15 years, into something closer to genuine friendship than simple, professional courtesy. They know each other's families by now, have celebrated birthdays and mourned losses together in the small, quiet way that comes from sharing an hour every single week for over a decade. The stylist has watched her grandchildren grow up through photographs shared appointment after appointment, has heard about every small joy and worry that has passed through this woman's life since the day she first retired. She settles into the shampoo bowl with the same easy comfort she brings to every part of this appointment, closing her eyes, letting the warm water do its familiar work, chatting easily about whatever has happened in her week, a visit from her daughter, a new program she's been watching on television, a small ache in her knee that she mentions mostly in passing. Beneath the dryer, she reads the same kind of magazine she's read for years, though her eyes tire more quickly now than they once did, and she often finds herself simply closing them instead, letting the warm hum of the dryer lull her into something close to a light doze, comfortable and unhurried, in no rush at all to have this particular hour end. When the appointment finally finishes, her hair looks almost exactly as it did the week before, neat, familiar, entirely her own after so many years of the same careful maintenance. She studies her reflection with quiet satisfaction, not looking for transformation, only reassurance that she still looks like herself, that this one small steady part of her week remains reliably unchanged, even as so much else around her continues to shift. She thanks her stylist warmly, the same words she says every single week, and schedules next Wednesday, before she's even reached the door, already looking forward, in her quiet way, to this same comfortable hour arriving again exactly on schedule, a small steady anchor in a life that has learned after 15 years to treasure precisely this kind of gentle consistency. It is early evening now, and the salon fills again with women stopping in after work, hair still pinned from the morning, hoping for a quick style before dinner plans or a night out. The pace quickens, dryers humming in every corner, the day's energy rising one more time before it finally begins to settle. The quiet lull of late afternoon breaks all at once as the front door opens repeatedly in quick succession. Women arriving still dressed from their workday, purses clutched tightly, checking their watches with the particular urgency of someone squeezing one more errand into an already full evening. The stylists, refreshed from their brief afternoon lull, rise to meet this new wave with practiced efficiency, greeting each arrival warmly despite the sudden shift in pace. Some of these evening customers are regulars stopping by for a quick trim before a dinner engagement, while others are newer faces, working women who have only recently found time to slip a salon visit between the end of their workday and whatever evening plans await them. There is a different energy to this crowd than the leisurely morning regulars, a slight breathlessness, a sense of time being carefully managed rather than luxuriously spent. The stylists adjust their pace accordingly, moving a little more briskly than they did earlier in the day, though never sacrificing the careful attention that defines the salon's reputation. A woman explains, a little apologetically, that she only has 40 minutes before she needs to leave for a dinner reservation, and the stylist nods, already calculating in her head exactly how to manage a wash and quick set within that window, prioritizing efficiency without ever making the customer feel rushed. Conversation during this hour tends to run a little quicker too, shorter exchanges rather than the long meandering talks of the afternoon, women catching each other up briefly on their day before turning their attention back to the practical business of getting ready for whatever evening awaits them. There is less time here for idle gossip, more focus on the immediate task at hand, though even in this quickened pace, small moments of genuine warmth still manage to surface. The dryers hum in every corner of the room now, nearly all of them occupied, creating a fuller, louder atmosphere than the quiet lull of just an hour earlier. Stylists move quickly between stations, checking on one client while attending to another, the whole room operating with a kind of practiced choreography that comes only from years of managing exactly this kind of predictable evening rush. A woman rushes through the door with only 20 minutes to spare, apologising profusely for the short notice, and the stylist waves off her concern, already reaching for a comb, promising to do what she can in the time available. There is an unspoken generosity in moments like these, a willingness to bend the schedule slightly for someone clearly in need, understanding that everyone's evening plans matter, that a quick, well-executed style can make all the difference to how a woman feels walking into whatever awaits her that night. By the time the evening rush finally begins to taper off, the salon has taken on an entirely different character than it held just a few hours earlier, faster, more urgent, though no less warm in its own particular way. Women leave one after another, hair freshly styled, checking their reflections quickly in compact mirrors before hurrying back out into the evening, off toward dinners and dates and whatever else the night has planned for them. The stylists, tired now after a full day that has run the entire spectrum from quiet morning regulars to this final rushed hour, begin at last to see the pace slow toward true closing time, the last few customers finishing up. The room gradually emptying back into the kind of stillness it held so briefly earlier that afternoon, before the whole cycle begins again tomorrow morning. Let's stay a while past closing time, when the last customer's gone and the stylist begins sweeping the day's hair into soft, colourful piles across the floor. It is a strange, quiet kind of evidence. All these different lives that pass through the same chairs, now gathered together in a dustpan before being swept away. The salon empties gradually after the evening rush finally concludes, the last customer thanking her stylist warmly before stepping out into the darkening evening, the bell above the door ringing one final time for the day. What remains behind is a room considerably more dishevelled than it appeared that morning, hair scattered across the floor near every station, towels piled in hampers waiting to be washed, bottles and combs left slightly out of place after a long day of steady use. The stylists move through this closing ritual with the same quiet efficiency they bring to every other part of their work, though there is a different energy to it now, unhurried in its own way despite the physical tiredness clearly settling into their shoulders after a full day on their feet. Brooms come out from a closet near the back room, and the sweeping begins, methodical, station by station, gathering the accumulated evidence of the day into small, colourful piles. There is something almost meditative about this particular task, sweeping hair that belongs to no one in particular anymore, blonde strands mixed indiscriminately with grey, with brunette, with the occasional bright red that belonged to whichever customer sat in that chair sometime during the afternoon. Each pile represents, in its own strange way, a small cross-section of the day's entire clientele, women who never met each other, who came and went at different hours, whose only connection is this shared floor swept clean together at the very end of the day. The stylist working through this task thinks back sometimes over the customers who passed through her station that day, the woman getting her colour touched up before a class reunion, the nervous new customer trying out the salon for the first time, the teenager delighted with her first grown-up haircut. Each pile of swept hair carries with it, in some small way, the memory of the conversation that accompanied it, though of course the hair itself holds no such memory, indifferent now to whatever story surrounded its cutting. The broom moves in steady, even strokes, gathering everything toward a central point before it gets swept finally into the dustpan and emptied into the trash bin near the back door. It is unglamorous work, entirely unseen by any customer, happening only after the salon has emptied out for the evening, and yet it carries its own particular satisfaction. The physical act of restoring order to a room that has spent an entire day in careful, controlled chaos. Other stylists move through their own closing routines simultaneously, wiping down mirrors smudged with hairspray residue, capping bottles left open on counters, coiling extension cords back into careful loops beside the dryers. There is a rhythm to this closing work too, just as practiced and familiar as the rhythm of an actual appointment, each stylist knowing exactly her own small set of tasks before she can finally head home for the evening. The radio, still playing quietly in the background, provides its usual accompaniment to this closing ritual, though the room feels different now with its emptiness, the music carrying further across the space without customers' conversation to compete against it. The stylists work mostly in a comfortable, tired silence, occasionally exchanging a brief comment about the day, a particularly demanding customer, a joke shared earlier that still brings a small smile. By the time the floors are finally swept clean and the counters wiped down, the salon has returned almost entirely to the quiet stillness it held that very first thing this morning, though now it carries the particular tiredness of a full day's use rather than the anticipatory quiet of a day not yet begun. The stylists gather their things, exchange quiet good nights, and prepare to head home, leaving behind a room emptied of its daily chaos, waiting patiently now for tomorrow morning when the whole familiar cycle will begin again. It is closing time now, and the owner moves through the salon one last time, switching off lights, wiping down counters, checking that the perm solution is capped tight for the night. She locks the door behind her, glancing back once at the darkened room, already thinking of tomorrow's first appointment before she's even reached her car. She moves through this final routine alone, most nights, the last one to leave after her stylists have already gathered their things and headed home to their own families, their own evenings waiting beyond these walls. There is a particular solitude to this last hour, the salon finally quiet in a way it never quite manages to be during business hours, every chair empty, every dryer silent, the whole room settling into the stillness of overnight rest. She checks each station methodically as she moves through the space, an old habit developed over years of running this business, making sure nothing has been left carelessly out of place, no bottle left uncapped that might spill or evaporate overnight, no scissors left where they might be misplaced by morning. It is a small ritual of care, born from the same instinct that leads her to keep the coffee fresh and the towels folded, a quiet pride in maintaining a space that so many women have come to depend upon. The perm solutions in particular require careful attention before she leaves, capped tightly to preserve their potency for tomorrow's appointments, checked twice out of long habit even though she knows, almost without needing to look, that everything has already been properly secured by the stylist before they departed. There is a small satisfaction in this final verification, a business owner's quiet diligence that customers rarely see or think about, but that keeps everything running smoothly, day after day, year after year. She pauses near the front desk to glance once more at tomorrow's appointment book, running her finger down the list of names already penciled in for the morning ahead. Some familiar faces she's known for years, a few newer names still finding their place within this small, steady community. There is comfort in this glimpse forward, a reminder that whatever quiet stillness settles over the room tonight, it will lift again tomorrow morning, replaced by the same warm, familiar bustle that has defined this space for so long. The lights come off one bank at a time, the same way they were switched on that very morning, the room darkening gradually until only the faint glow from the streetlight outside filters through the front window, casting long, quiet shadows across the empty chairs. She takes a final look around before reaching for her coat, allowing herself a brief moment simply to appreciate the space, the work of an entire day now finished, folded neatly away until tomorrow. Stepping toward the door, she pauses one last time, keys in hand, glancing back at the darkened salon behind her. It is a small, unremarkable moment, repeated identically nearly every single evening, and yet it carries its own quiet significance, the closing punctuation mark at the end of a day filled with countless small acts of care, countless conversations, countless women who walk through that door feeling one way and left feeling considerably better. She steps outside, pulling the door shut firmly behind her, turning the key in the lock with the same practiced motion she's used for years. The street outside has grown quiet too, evening settling fully now over the whole block, streetlights glowing steadily, the drugstore 2 doors down already closed for the night as well. She walks toward her car with her thoughts already drifting ahead to tomorrow, the first appointment scheduled for 9 o'clock, a regular she's known for over a decade, expecting nothing more from tomorrow than the same steady, comfortable rhythm this salon has offered for so many years now, opening its doors each morning to whoever walks through them, ready once again to begin the whole quiet, familiar ritual all over again. Let's pause for a moment on the small interruption that happens most afternoons around 2 o'clock, when the delivery boy arrives with boxes of fresh supplies balanced against his hip, kicking the door open with the practiced ease of someone who's made this same stop 3 times a week for years. The bell above the door rings differently for him than it does for customers, a little more hurried, a little less ceremonial, and everyone in the room glances up briefly before returning to whatever conversation or curl they were in the middle of. He's young, barely out of high school, and clearly a little embarrassed by the particular femininity of his surroundings, keeping his eyes carefully forward as he carries boxes of setting lotion and fresh towels toward the back room. The stylists tease him gently, the way they might tease a nephew, asking after his mother, his schoolwork, whether he's found a girl yet. Questions he answers with the flustered brevity of someone eager to complete his task and escape back out into the more comfortable anonymity of the street. The owner meets him at the counter with a clipboard, checking the delivery against her order from the week before, making small adjustments here and there, an extra case of shampoo this time, 1 less box of rollers than usual since the last shipment still has plenty left. There is a familiar rhythm to this exchange too, repeated so many times over the years that both of them could likely manage it without exchanging more than a few necessary words. The boxes themselves smell faintly of cardboard and the chemical sharpness of whatever product lies inside, a scent that mixes briefly with the salon's usual perfume of hairspray and coffee before settling into the background entirely. He stacks everything carefully in the storage closet, the way he's been shown to since his very first delivery here, mindful of which shelf holds which supply, careful not to crowd the perm solution too closely against the more delicate bottles of colour. Some of the regulars know him well enough by now to ask after him directly when he passes through, remembering small details from months earlier, a football game he mentioned, a summer job he was hoping to land. He answers politely, a little surprised each time that these women remember such specifics about a boy who spends barely 5 minutes in their company each week. There is a small, quiet kindness in this attentiveness, the same instinct that makes this whole room feel like a community rather than simply a business. Once the delivery is finished and signed for, he lingers only a moment longer, accepting a cup of coffee if it is offered, though he rarely has time to actually drink it before he needs to be back on the road toward his next stop. The stylists wave him off with easy affection, already turning their attention back toward whatever appointment was interrupted, and within a minute or two, the room settles back into its usual rhythm as though the small disruption had barely happened at all. Outside, his truck pulls away from the curb, engine rumbling faintly before fading into the general hum of the street, and the salon continues on exactly as it was. One more small delivery folded quietly into the steady architecture of an ordinary Tuesday. It is a moment easy to overlook, this brief visit from a boy delivering nothing more exciting than towels and shampoo, and yet it represents its own small thread in the larger fabric of the salon's daily life. A reminder that even the quietest, most reliable businesses depend on dozens of these small, unremarkable exchanges to keep running smoothly, day after day, delivery after delivery, year after year. It is mid-afternoon, and outside the front window, the sky has begun to darken with the particular heaviness that promises rain before a single drop has fallen. Inside, the salon carries on much as it always does, though there is a subtle shift in mood, women glancing occasionally toward the window, calculating in their heads whether they will make it home dry, whether they left a window open, whether the laundry still hanging on the line outside will need rescuing before the storm truly breaks. The first rumble of thunder arrives low and distant, more felt than heard beneath the steady hum of the dryers, and a few women look up instinctively, exchanging small, knowing glances with whoever sits nearest them. There is something almost cosy about being tucked safely inside on an afternoon like this. Warm air blowing steadily from the dryer, the window rattling faintly as the wind outside begins to pick up in earnest. The stylists continue their work without much interruption, though conversation naturally drifts toward the weather, comparing notes on how bad the forecast predicted this storm might be, whether the creek near the edge of town tends to flood when the rain comes down too hard too fast. It is the kind of talk that fills space comfortably without requiring much real attention, the background noise of a room settling into itself as the sky outside grows steadily darker. Rain finally arrives all at once, sheeting suddenly against the front window with a sound loud enough to draw everyone's attention briefly away from their conversations. A woman beneath the dryer laughs softly at the timing of it, grateful she's not out on the road just now, grateful for this warm, dry room holding her safely apart from whatever chaos the weather has decided to bring. The lights flicker once briefly, and several women hold their breath instinctively, though the power holds steady, and the room settles back into its usual rhythm. The owner moves quickly to check that the front door is secure against the wind, glancing outside at the street now emptied of its usual foot traffic, everyone having ducked indoors somewhere at the first sign of the coming storm. She watches for a moment as rain streams down the window in heavy, uneven sheets, distorting the view of the street beyond into something soft and impressionistic, before turning back toward the warm, dry business of the afternoon still unfolding behind her. Conversation among the customers takes on a slightly different quality during a storm like this, a shared awareness of being sheltered together, strangers and regulars alike bound briefly by nothing more than the same dry roof over their heads, while the weather does its worst just outside. Someone mentions, half joking, that at least there is nowhere better to wait out a storm than beneath a warm hood dryer with a good magazine, and a few nearby women laugh in easy agreement. The storm passes eventually, the way storms always do, rain softening gradually into a lighter patter before stopping altogether, the sky outside brightening by slow degrees until a thin strip of sunlight breaks through near the horizon. Customers glance toward the window again, relieved now rather than anxious, already gathering their things a little more readily, eager to get back out into the freshly washed afternoon air. By the time the last customer of that stretch heads for the door, the street outside glistens wet and clean beneath a sky rapidly clearing to blue, puddles collecting along the curb, the whole world outside looking freshly rinsed and renewed. The salon, meanwhile, has hardly paused at all through the entire episode, the storm simply another small variable absorbed easily into its steady, unhurried rhythm, One more ordinary afternoon weathered together beneath one warm, reliable roof. Let's turn now to the small commotion building quietly near the back counter, where two of the stylists are whispering together over a cake box, trying to keep their voices low enough that the woman getting her hair done 2 chairs down will not catch on to what is being planned. It is her birthday, though she insists every year that she would rather not make a fuss about it, and every year her fellow stylists ignore this request entirely, determined to celebrate her properly. The cake itself was picked up earlier that morning before the salon even opened, tucked carefully into the back room where its presence has remained a closely guarded secret throughout the entire day. A few candles wait beside it, along with a card already signed by half the regular customers who happened to stop by earlier and were let in on the plan, delighted to be included in the small conspiracy. The birthday woman herself suspects nothing, absorbed instead in the usual rhythm of her Tuesday appointment, chatting easily with her stylist about nothing in particular, unaware of the quiet coordination happening just a few feet away. She has worked at this salon for nearly 20 years now, a steady, beloved fixture behind her own station, and the other stylists have been looking forward to this small surprise for nearly a week. As her appointment nears its end, one of the other stylists slips quietly into the back room, emerging a few minutes later with the cake held carefully, candles now lit and flickering gently as she carries it toward the front. The room grows quiet all at once, customers and stylists alike turning to watch, and the birthday woman looks up just as everyone breaks into song together, voices overlapping warmly in the familiar tune, a little off-key, entirely sincere. Her hands fly to her face, genuinely surprised, despite years of half expecting exactly this kind of ambush every single birthday. She laughs, protests weakly that she told them not to make a fuss, though her eyes shine with obvious pleasure at being remembered so warmly by the people she spends nearly every working day beside. The cake is set down carefully on the counter, and she leans forward to blow out the candles, the whole room applauding gently as she does. The cake gets cut and passed around generously, small paper plates distributed to customers and stylists alike, everyone pausing their afternoon business for a few minutes to share in this small, sweet celebration. Conversation turns naturally toward memories, someone recalling her first week working here decades ago, another remembering a particularly disastrous perm she once helped fix, the stories offered with real affection, the kind that only accumulates after so many years spent working closely alongside someone. She accepts the card next, reading through the messages with visible emotion, some funny, some sincere, each one a small testament to the genuine warmth this room holds for her after so many years of steady, dedicated work. The other stylists watch her read with quiet satisfaction, glad to have pulled off the surprise despite her usual protests, glad for the excuse to pause, if only briefly, and celebrate someone who spends most of her days quietly celebrating everyone else. By the time the small party winds down and everyone returns to their afternoon appointments, cake crumbs swept quickly from the counter, the room has been infused with a particular warmth that lingers pleasantly through the rest of the day. It is a small reminder, tucked into an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, of exactly what makes a place like this endure for so many years, not merely the steady business of hair and colour and careful attention, but the real human affection that grows naturally among people who spend so many hours of their lives quietly caring for one another. It is mid-morning now, and a woman sits carefully in a chair near the back, a soft cloth cap already fitted snugly over her own thinning hair, waiting patiently while the stylist retrieves several wig boxes from a cabinet reserved specifically for this purpose. She's been coming here for wig fittings for several months now, ever since treatment for an illness she rarely discusses in detail left her hair falling out in patches too noticeable to hide any longer beneath careful styling alone. The stylist handles this particular service with a gentleness distinct from her usual brisk efficiency, aware of how much more this appointment carries than a simple change in hairstyle. She opens the first box carefully, lifting out a wig styled close to the woman's natural colour, and settles it gently over the cloth cap, adjusting it slowly at the temples and nape until it sits naturally, convincingly, the way real hair might fall. The woman studies her reflection quietly, turning her head this way and that, searching for the particular reassurance that comes from looking, at least for these few minutes, like the version of herself she remembers being before all of this began. There is no rush in this appointment, no clock ticking away minutes the way it does during a perm, only patient, careful adjustment, until something in her expression finally softens with recognition. The stylist offers a few practical suggestions: how best to secure the wig in the mornings, how to care for it so it lasts as long as possible. Small technical details delivered gently, matter-of-factly, without ever drawing unnecessary attention to the reason behind this particular appointment. She's done this before, for other women in the neighbourhood facing similar difficulties, and she has learned exactly the right balance of practical guidance and quiet compassion this work requires. Other customers nearby, aware of what is happening without needing it explained directly, offer their own small kindnesses throughout the appointment. A warm smile passed across the room, a compliment on how natural the new style looks once it is finally settled into place. There is an unspoken code of gentleness that governs the whole salon during moments like this, an understanding that some appointments carry weight far beyond the usual business of curls and colour. The woman tries on a second option too, just to compare, though she finds herself drawn back toward the first, something about its particular shade and texture feeling more genuinely like her own hair than anything else in the cabinet. The stylist makes a few final adjustments, trimming slightly around the edges, shaping the style until it falls exactly the way she prefers. When the fitting is finally finished, the woman sits for a long moment simply studying her own reflection, and something in her posture straightens slightly. A small return of confidence visible in the way she squares her shoulders, lifts her chin just a little higher than she carried it when she first walked through the door. She thanks the stylist with real feeling, her voice a little unsteady, though her smile carries genuine warmth. As she gathers her things to leave, several of the other women offer quiet words of encouragement. A hand briefly touched to her arm, a soft acknowledgement offered without ever needing to name directly what she is going through. She steps back out into the ordinary daylight of the street outside, carrying herself just a little differently than when she arrived, and the whole salon, in its own quiet way, feels glad to have played some small part in that particular private restoration. And that brings us to the end of a full day inside a 1970s American beauty salon, from that first quiet hour before the bell above the door ever rang, all the way through to the final click of the lock at closing time. There is something quietly remarkable about a place like this, a room where women arrived carrying the small weights of their week, a tired shoulder, a worried thought, a piece of news too good or too heavy to keep to themselves, and left a few hours later feeling just a little lighter, a little more taken care of. It was never really only about the hair. It was about the shampoo bowl that let you close your eyes for 5 honest minutes. It was about the dryer that asked nothing of you at all. It was about a stranger's steady hands and a familiar face across the chair, and a whole neighbourhood quietly keeping track of itself, one appointment at a time. Places like this still exist here and there, tucked into corners of towns that have not quite let go of the old rhythms, but so much of what made them what they were. The standing Wednesday appointment, the perm timer ticking on the counter, the radio humming low enough for everyone and no one, belongs mostly to memory now. It is the kind of quiet, ordinary comfort that is harder to find these days. And maybe that is exactly why it is worth sitting with for a little while, here in the dark before you drift off. If you found yourself back in that salon tonight, even just for a little while, I am glad you let me take you there. If this is the kind of evening you enjoy spending together, I would love it if you considered subscribing. And if there is another piece of everyday history from this era you've been curious about, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and so many of these videos exist only because someone took the time to ask. Wherever you are listening from tonight, I hope the day was kind to you, and if it wasn't, I hope this hour gave you a little bit of rest. Sleep well, and I will see you back here again soon for another quiet corner of the past.